These plastic shelves have been in my shop since pretty much day one, 6 years ago. They were supposed to be a temporary solution to storage, but 6 years later, they're still here and holding a ton of dust. So in this video, I'm going to get rid of these plastic shelves and replace them with a plywood cabinet I designed in SketchUp. By the way, I'll have the SketchUp file linked in the description below, free of charge. That's right, free. So while I break down all this plywood for all the parts I'm needing for this cabinet, let me tell you a story about how I got all this cabinet grade plywood for only $80. So on a recent episode of my podcast, Shop Sounds Podcast, that I co-host with Jason Hibbs of Bourbon Moth Woodworking and Keith Johnson, better known as KJ Sawdust, I was telling them about wanting to build this storage cabinet, but the prices of plywood were just so high. But after that episode aired, a listener, Casey Clark, shot me a DM and told me about this place, the Peddler's Mall in Lexington. So apparently there's this guy with a booth at this flea market that goes around to all these cabinet shops in the 5 or 6 county area and buys all of their cutoffs and scratch indents. He then puts them in his booth at the flea market for sale at next to nothing prices. So when I got there and I found everything I need, it's all 5/8 inch two-sided pre-finished maple plywood. I was floored. I grabbed everything I needed for the storage cabinet and headed to the register. It only cost me $80. Everything you see here in the back of this truck was only $80. Did I mention it was only 80 bucks? Anyways, that's not even the cost of one sheet of two-sided pre-finished maple plywood. So huge shout out to Casey for saving me close to $400 in material. Thanks, man. So I've cut all my parts with the track saw, and now I'm cutting the toe kick out on each side of my cabinet. I used my track saw and I got really close, but as you can see here, I came back with the jigsaw to cut each side to finish that cut. And you see the blue tape there helps reduce any tear out that might happen, and nobody wants any tear out, especially me. I hate tear out. But peel that tape off, buttery smooth. Next up was some pocket holes, and I wish somebody would have stopped me here. I designed this cabinet in the wrong way. I should have designed this cabinet so that the top sat inside the sides and the pocket holes could have been hidden on the top of the cabinet. But no one stopped me, and here we are. I put pocket holes in the side where I'll see them every time I open the cabinet. Don't be like me, hide your pocket holes. I know better for next time, but it is what it is. Next up was assembly time, and I am putting the carcass together here with some corner clamps that I'm using to keep everything square, adding some screws, top and bottom, and then I'm going to add the toe kick here on the front, and I'm going to screw it in place, and then also add the bottom shelf support, and what do you know, I'm going to screw it into place. Now, moving this thing by myself was a pretty big task. It was wobbly and not small, which happened to be two things my son says about my midsection. But I did manage to get it off of my assembly table, stood upright, and then also get a cart, a wheeled, like, furniture dolly cart. Not like a shopping cart or a other. Are there other kind of carts? I don't know. Anyways, it's on a cart, and then I'm going to be able to move it around to the back side of my shop. It was a little unwieldy there because it's not really sitting on the cart well, but I was able to get it to the back of my shop, and then I needed to add the bottom shelf support, which is also the upper part of the drawer section. So I clamped on a scrap piece of plywood to the right height to act kind of like a ledger board. And then I did the same thing on the other side, and then I could get it all tightened up. And then I would grab a larger level to make sure that everything was nice and square and level. Yep, we're good. So then I could also grab my shelf and then grab my drill, some pocket screws, and, well, actually clamps first, and then come back with the screws and make sure everything is nice and secure. Next was time to drill the shelf pin holes. And I used this Rockler shelving jig to drill all of those shelf pin holes in the upper part of this cabinet. It was really easy with this jig. Rockler was nice enough to send over this jig, the drawer slides, and the hardware for this cabinet. If you haven't checked out Rockler for all your woodworking needs, do so. They have everything. I'll have links in the description to everything I used in this build and more. This jig made really easy work of drilling all of these holes and making sure they were all in the right place, and I gotta say, having a jig makes everything so much easier. Thanks, Rockler. I really do appreciate this. So with all the holes drilled, I could then check my shelf and make sure it was gonna fit in there right, and it is snug as a bug in a rug. Now this is the point where I realized that I forgot to add a rabbet to the back side of this cabinet that would allow the back to sit flush. So I moved the Carcass yet again on my wheeled cart back over to the other side of my garage, and I laid it down on its face, and I added a 5/16 rabbeting bit to my router so I could cut a rabbet all the way around the Carcass. And as you can see here, I took my time and made sure that I was nice and level, and then made that rabbeting cut all the way around. Now, however, because I already had the top on, it's going to leave a rounded edge on the top side. So I took my trend corner chisel, gave it a nice whack, and that gave me a template that I could then come back with a normal chisel and hammer and chisel away at that corner so that my corners would not be rounded and the back wouldn't have to be specially sanded to fit in there. I could just measure and cut a nice big rectangle. So with the rabbet cut in the back, it was time to make a couple of drawers. And I've only used pocket holes up until now, but I really don't like how pocket holes work on 1/2-inch ply. They kind of stick out just a little bit on the face of the drawers, and I just don't really like that. So I opted to use my domino, as you see here. I'm using my Seneca Woodworking Dama plate set up for 1/2-inch plywood, and it makes it just so much easier. I'm using the flappers to register each side of the ply, and I'm cutting 2 mortises in each piece. And then once you see everything cut, I line it up and make sure we are going to be making a drawer. Yep, that looks like a rectangle. So then I can get my glue. I'm using, this is actually quick and thick glue, but it's in a bottle that is labeled molding and trim. Fun fact, the molding and trim glue has just been relabeled quick and thick so that consumers will use it. Huh, how about that? It's actually my favorite glue to use because I think clamp time's like 20 minutes and you're good to go. Yeah, by far my favorite glue. So here you see I've got a clamp on and I'm just squeezing everything together, get it nice and tight. Those dominoes hold everything really tight. But then I'm gonna come back and, you know, wipe off any squeeze out, make sure it's nice and clean, and then I'm gonna check for square, both sides, make sure they are about the same within, you know, a hair is fine. And then I'm gonna add a couple brad nails to hold everything together while that quick and thick or molding and trim glue dries. Now is the time I'm gonna add the bottoms to the drawers. Even though it looks like I'm putting them on top, it's actually the bottom. I know. Anyways, some glue around the edges there, and then I'm gonna put the tops on the bottoms, or the bottoms on the top. Which one is it? Bottoms on the tops? Anyways, again, I'm gonna grab my brad nailer. I'm gonna throw some brad nails in these, and then once that glue dries, I can take it over and I'm gonna add a huge flush trim bit into my router and then flush up those bottoms to the sides of the drawer box. Nice and flush. All right, it's time to install the drawer slides. I'm using the 16-inch, 100-pound rated drawer slides that I got from Rockler. I'm just using a scrap piece of plywood to elevate the lower slides off of the bottom of the cabinet, and I'm just using the included hardware to screw them all in. So now you see me moving up to the second set of slides, which I'm also using another piece of scrap plywood that just happened to be sitting around the shop, and I'm using that to make each slide the same distance from the other slide. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me. I'm just spacing them out. That's it. I'm just using it as a spacer. Yeah. So now I'm going to install the drawer boxes. I placed another piece of scrap plywood of the 5/8 plywood that I had from earlier, and I put it underneath the drawer box so that the drawer box would be elevated just a little bit, so those slides be up off that bottom of the box just a little bit. After removing that scrap piece of plywood, then I could check to make sure we were sliding good and everything looks good, and I could move on to the upper box and do the exact same thing. And while I thought it was sticking a little bit, it was actually because the whole carcass was still kind of racking a little bit, but I'll take care of that in a little bit. Next was time to install the hinges for the double doors. I had these no mortise 270-degree hinges already on hand, so I thought they'd be perfect for this, so I installed them. And I was right, they were perfect. To attach the doors to the hinges, I simply clamped the doors right in place where I wanted them and then screwed them in from the back. Sorry I couldn't show this better, but my shop's pretty small and I couldn't get the camera around to the back side, so you'll just have to imagine me screwing all of the doors in from the back. If you look closely though, you'll see some handy shims that are 1/8 inch size that I'm using to space the doors there in the middle, and everything worked out great. The doors open and close perfectly. So now I was on to mounting the false drawers, and to do this I again used some more of those handy shims. I'll have links to that in the description below. And then I used some clamps to hold them onto the front of the cabinet, and then I went around to the back side and then drilled in some holes and screws to attach the drawer front to the box, and just like that, the front is attached to the box. So rinse and repeat, do the same thing, clamps, shims, screws, attach them from the inside, and we have another drawer face on a drawer box. It's pretty easy. Now the back was still off this thing, so I thought now would be the time to install it. So I grabbed some green tape to close everything up, make sure the drawers wouldn't fall out, the doors wouldn't open, and I could lay it down onto its face. Now I dropped in the back piece, which is just a 1/4 inch piece of plywood, and then I threw in approximately 400 brad nails into the back. Well, maybe not that many, maybe like 300, but anyways, as I was lifting the back up, the green tape didn't hold and the front doors came wide open saying, "Come on in," but not a big deal. I got it back up and everything was good to go. So with the new cabinet basically put together, ready to be moved into its new place, it was time to get all this junk off of my old plastic shelves. And let me just tell you, I had no idea they were holding so much stuff. But now with everything off those plastic shelves, it was time to get them out of the shop, and then I could move the new cabinet over into its new final resting location. Wait, why do you say final resting location? Or final rest? Anyways, this is where it's gonna be, at least until we move. Now I needed to install the poles, and this was really easy with the jig from True Position Tools. You just set the distance you need for your poles that you're using, determine where you need them to go on your drawer face, and just drill your holes. It's really easy, really repeatable, and I can't say enough for how simple they've made installing drawer poles. So with the top drilled, moving on to the bottom, getting it drilled, I could then install the poles, get the top one in, and then move on to the bottom. And with them both in, I could then move on to drilling the doors. Now they are the same poles as the drawers, just vertical. So all I needed to do was just determine the height that I wanted those poles to be at, and then translate that over to the jig and drill away. Super, super, super easy install. So on the top drawer, I decided to use some of Rockler's Lock-A-Line drawer organizers. And I love this stuff. It's super easy to install. If you haven't noticed, I love easy installs. You simply lock it together, cut it to size to fit your own drawer, and then you just insert whatever tub size, dividers, large trays, small trays, and then that's it. I am gonna love having this in my shop and let it just evolve as time goes on. So what about all that stuff that was on my old shelves? Man, look at all this junk. Let's make it all go away, shall we? Much, much better. But where did it all go? Let's see where most of it ended up. The storage cabinet has plenty of room for my sandpaper on top, finishes and some glue in the middle, and then more wood glue and some other stuff here on the bottom shelf. And then you open the top drawer, it's organized for all my knickknacks. And then the bottom drawer has all of my spray finishes and epoxy. Being able to keep all this stuff in one place and having it be dust-free will be such a nice change. Thanks again to Rockler for the support, and if you want to check out my SketchUp file, it's in the description below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.